and welcome to Balance by Design. Last episode, we talked about invisible work, the hidden cognitive and emotional load people carry. But invisible work doesn't just make people tired, it changes how they think and how they respond. We talked last time about my framework of notice, name, respond, and sustain. And we mostly stayed in notice, where we talked about the feelings that open loops cause, and we talked about name, where we named invisible work and open loops. Today, I'm going to talk more about responding and sustaining. So when I talk about responding, I'm not just talking about reacting. When you react, you're doing something without thinking. You're just reacting to what's in front of you. Usually that's the loudest thing that you see. So I call that squirrel mode. It's whatever is in front of you that I have to handle that right now. And you jump and you take care of it. So for example, maybe you're on your planning time and you're working on an IEP, and your principal walks in and they want to talk about end of the year student transitions. The principal is going to be the loudest thing, not necessarily because they're, talking loudly, but they're going to be the priority. They're the thing that you have to deal with right now. So you put aside the IEP to talk to the principal, and then you might end up moving into the transition work that they were talking about instead of finishing your IEP, because the transition work becomes the loudest thing that you need to look at and think about. There's also a lot of interruption switching. So this is something that both teachers and leaders are very familiar with, leaders especially. I made a joke my first year as in a leadership position. I said I had no idea how many times that leaders hear, "Do you have a minute?" And if I got $1 for every time somebody said that to me, I think I could have retired after my first year. We all do it. I still do it. Even I'm in a teaching role right now, but sometimes I still have to go to my leaders and do you have a minute? And I have to ask them a question. But it's something that leaders hear all the time. And as a leader, you almost always have to say yes, whether you really have a minute or not, and you need to address whatever is coming up. Teachers experience this too. We experience it from other teachers. We experience it from leaders. We experience it from students, from parents, everybody. So all of us are familiar with that. Do you have a minute? And sometimes it's not just a minute, right? Sometimes people have something a lot longer that they want to talk about. But even if it is just a minute, you're switching what you were doing. So whatever you were working on, you have to put aside, move to whatever the person's talking about, and then maybe you can go back to what you were originally working on before the interruption. Sometimes as teachers or leaders, students have a crisis. And so that becomes the thing that you have to react to. If you have a student that's having a meltdown and they start flipping tables, you can't keep working on whatever you were planning on working on. You have to take care of that right now. So sometimes we do have to just react, and we have to take care of what's in front of us. Sometimes it's things that we don't really have to do. So maybe your colleague stops in for a chat, and either you don't want to be rude and say you don't have time, or maybe they have some juicy gossip, and so you stay and have that chat. That's an interruption that is interrupting what you're trying to do, and it makes it harder sometimes to go back to it. Some people say that they work best under pressure, so they don't mind the reaction, or they say they don't mind it because they feel like they actually get more done if they wait until, okay, now it's a priority and I have to do it. So maybe that task that could have been done a week ago now becomes the loudest thing in the room because it's due today at 4:00 and you have to get it done. Some of that is procrastination. Some of that is things that you can organize your way out of and that you do need to deal with on a personal level. But sometimes that pressure comes because the system is constantly throwing things at you. And so that's a little bit different. And we're going to talk about that difference between the personal pressure and the system pressure, because the personal you handle in a different way, obviously, than you do for the system pressure. Sometimes we respond quickly because we feel pressure to. I know my first year in leadership, I didn't stop to think that I can say, let me give you an answer later. And so I would give an answer right away. The drive-by conversations when you're in the hallway and a teacher stops you and they have a question, you feel like you should give an answer immediately. But then sometimes when you do that, you walk away and you're like, geez, that wasn't the right answer. I don't really want to do A. I would have rather done B if I would have thought about it for another second. And sometimes you end up creating more work for yourself because of that. Teachers do it too. If you get cornered by a parent, or maybe somebody, a colleague or a leader is like, hey, can you help out with the bake sale tomorrow? And you feel like you have to respond right now. So you might just say, yes, sure, I can. and then you realize, I really don't have time to do that. So sometimes we feel that pressure where we have to respond quickly, and that's something that we have to learn to shut off. It's okay to not respond right away. It's okay to take a pause. And I'm going to talk a little bit later in this episode about some ways that you can do that. So there's some major differences that I want to go through with reacting versus responding. Reacting is immediate. Responding is intentional. So reacting, because it's immediate, doesn't always have a lot of thought behind it. You know, when you say yes to the bake sale, where if you're intentional about it, maybe you saw the flyer, you thought about it, and you thought, hey, I do want to help with that. And so you reach out to the person. That's responding. That's different than the reacting. Reacting is usually emotionally driven. Either it's something that you feel pressured to do, or it might be something that you feel anxiety if you don't do it, so you have to do it, or you have some sort of social pressure to do it. Responding is values driven. So when you respond to something, you're doing it because you want to in some way. There's some value in you that's saying that I should do that. It's not as a response to emotions. Reacting is about solving the loudest issue, and responding is looking at the real issue. So sometimes those are the same thing, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes the loudest issue is just a symptom of what the real issue is. And so if you stay in react mode all the time, that issue is going to keep popping up again and again and again and again, because you're only responding to the symptoms, reacting to the symptoms instead of responding to the actual issue, the root cause. Reacting gives you short-term relief. It's something, I'm going to take care of this right now. And you might feel good if you get that one thing done, but then there are 10 other things that you had to turn your back on to get that one thing done. So it's short-term relief, but often we'll come back to something longer. Where responding gives you sustainable clarity. So if you're attacking the root of the problem and you're looking at what really needs to be taken care of, and you handle that, then you get clarity and you have something that's sustained long-term because it doesn't keep coming up again and again. Reacting is urgent. This is where I'm going to talk about chronic urgency. And this is the idea that something it's happening right now, and you have to do something about it. Responding is more about aligning. It's looking at what is needed and making purposeful decisions towards that. So both reacting and responding, you're doing something, you're reacting to some issue, but the pure reacting is just emotions, quick, right now, let's do it. And responding is more intentional and thoughtful. So sometimes I mentioned you might have a personal thing that you need to take care of. If you find yourself always saying, oh, I work under pressure, I don't mind that, or maybe you seem like you're always behind, you need to look, is it a personal thing or is it a systems thing? So if you're the only one that's having the problem, if it's something that you've noticed and it's a pattern that you've seen in multiple jobs, multiple school systems, multiple settings, you might have an organization problem that you need to deal with. So handle that. Figure out a good to-do list, figure out how to schedule your time. For lots of us, that's not really the problem though. I know for a long time I thought I had an organization problem, and I tried all kinds of different to-do lists and systems and apps and everything else. But what I found out is it wasn't me, it wasn't my organization, it was systems problems. So it's a system problem when it is repeating across people and across teams, and it seems like there's just always something happening. You can never catch your breath. That's more likely a systems thing. It's not that I put this off because I didn't want to do it. So for me, that's usually something to do with report cards. I really dislike doing report cards and progress reports. I do put those off. I will admit I'm a procrastinator when it comes to that. So if I end up with some urgency because the deadline is coming, that's my fault and I know it. But if it's something that I didn't know about, let's say that there's a report that somebody suddenly decided they needed, and I have to get the data together and write the report, and I've got 5 hours to do what should have been done in 20 hours, that's not a me problem, that's a systems problem. So you need to look at kind of what's causing this urgency. If you can never catch your breath and it's one thing after another, it's probably systems. If there's this extra work all the time and organization doesn't help. So if you try different methods like I did, and you're trying the to-do lists and the apps and you schedule time out and you're doing all those things and it doesn't get any better, probably a systems issue, is probably not you. If you have lots of unexpected or last minute problems, that's the big key. And that's something that I've noticed when I've been in systems that had this problem. It was just, you could never get your feet under you because there was always something new coming at you that you didn't see. Usually we would find out that maybe the leader was behind, and so they should have known that this was coming and they missed it, or they are also running in chronic urgency because leaders are often juggling a whole bunch too. So if that's happening, whether you're a leader or a teacher, that's a sign that you need to move out of reaction and into responding so that you can get rid of some of those root issues that are causing your problems to keep popping up again and again and again. Another symptom is if your planning time isn't respected. So I know leadership, you don't really get planning time. Teachers are supposed to get planning time, but if it's constantly getting taken because you need to sub for somebody or meetings are scheduled and you never get that time, that's a systems problem. And that's something that needs to be figured out so that you can have that time to plan and think, because without that time, that's when some of these other things start stacking up. As leaders, you don't get planning time, and so you have to carve out some time in other ways that you can focus in on things that need that like heavy cognitive thinking. So for me, when I was in a leadership position, I would also often do before school. That was a time for me that things tended to be a little more quiet. So I would usually go in a little bit early, and I had some time before school that I could really just focus in on the stuff I had to focus in on. Usually after school, there's stuff that pops up in different things throughout the day that you're trying to catch up on. So as a leader, try to find something, even though you don't have actual planning time, that you can do some of this responding work where you can actually think about it and look at what is my root problem that I have to get to, so you're not reacting all the time. If we have this chronic urgency, and the reason that I care about chronic urgency is if this is happening in the system, then none of your burnout recovery strategies are going to work, whether it's personal or whether it's some sort of school-initiated teacher burnout prevention plan. If your system is causing the urgency, it doesn't matter what these other things are that you're trying to do for self-care or whatever else, it won't work because the system keeps re-traumatizing. It keeps putting out the same stressors over and over again. I think about an analogy from my childhood. I grew up with 3 siblings, and one of my brothers, when he was very little, he doesn't do this anymore, but when he was very little, sometimes when he would hit you, and then he'd be like, oh, sorry, and then he hit you again, oh, sorry, and he's like, you can't get mad at me because I said sorry. And so it's kind of like the system is doing that to you. So it just keeps popping up the same thing again and again, and it doesn't matter if it's accidental or, oh, whoops, I didn't see that. It's still causing that hit over and over again. And so that's why we have to go to the root and we have to figure out what is causing the chronic urgency. If you have the same problems that keep coming up, often somebody jumps in and tries to save it. So whether it's a teacher or a leader, and then that person ends up propping up a system that shouldn't be propped up. It's often leaders that do this, and it's often high-achieving teachers that do this. So your high-achieving teachers are going to end up taking on way, way more than they should because they want to help. And you see leaders that are relational and they care about their people, and they jump in because they don't want to see their teachers be stressed out. So they're trying to prop things up. Well, that not only burns out the person doing the propping up, but it also is going to cause frustration in everybody else because the problems keep coming. And whenever problems repeat, frustration tends to rise. So even if somebody jumps in and fixes it, if it keeps coming up, that's enough to get people frustrated. So that's one of the problems that will lead to burnout. I've also noticed that these problems tend to snowball or compound or escalate. So if it comes up once and then again and again, it usually starts causing this cascade effect, and you end up with more problems tacked onto it. And so then you end up with an even bigger problem. So it's not just recurring, but it actually gets bigger. So we don't want this chronic urgency caused by the system or by your own procrastination. We don't want that to keep happening and to keep coming up because it will get bigger and it will increase frustration. All right, so we talked about notice and name last week. I want to talk about respond and sustain this week. The biggest response you can do when you get in a situation with chronic urgency or you feel like you have to react is just to pause. It seems simple, but sometimes that's really hard to do. Now, if you have something that truly is an emergency, like a student having a meltdown, you might have to just address that right now. But once the student's calm, even in that case, you can pause and look back and, okay, what happened? What caused this problem? Why did they get upset? So even if it's something that you do have to react to right now, you can still pause afterwards and dissect what happened and try to figure out what is the issue. If you're in a conversation and somebody asks you to do something or there's something that's unclear, you can also pause. You can say, I want to think about that for a minute. That's a valid thing to say. It took me, I want to say, 5 or 6 months to learn to say that in my first year as a leader, to say, hold on, let me get back to you on that one, so that I could get a chance to think about it first. It was hard for me to do. So practice that. I want to think about that for a minute. Let me get back to you. Let me process that. Let me reflect on that and then come back to it. I'm not sure yet, and I want to think carefully before deciding. Pick a phrase, pick something that would feel natural to you, maybe pick 2 or 3 and practice those. And then the next time you get in a situation where you feel like, oh, I have to react right now, I have to respond right now, roll one of those phrases out. Honestly, just a pause like that will make a big difference because it gives you a minute to gather yourself and think about what do you really want to do in the situation. If it's after a situation has happened and you're looking at the problem, this also helps you because you're taking that pause and you're going to reflect and figure out why does this keep happening, and you're going to look at that. Another tool that I like, I call the 3-bucket system. So this is related to open loops. So you have your chronic urgency that I just talked about where you feel like you have to react. And then we have those open loops that happen when you have invisible work that's unclear and it's getting stuck in your head and it's rolling around in your head. Last episode, we talked about naming whatever the open loops are, and we talked about just writing them down to get them out of your head. So today, I want to talk about the next step. So once you have them written down, you need to contain them. And you contain them by putting them into one of 3 buckets. The first bucket is schedule. And schedule means that you're going to define the time and the action to do it. So if it's something that it's stuck in your head and you're like, you know what, I can do this, I have most of the information that I need to do it, I'm going to do this at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. And you put it on your calendar. So it is scheduled. So now it's out of your head. You know at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, you're going to handle whatever that is that you have to handle. You schedule it. The other bucket is to revisit. Maybe you don't have enough clarity yet. You don't know what you need to do to complete that task. So you know that I can't do that right now because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Or I need to check with Susan to find out exactly what she wants me to do with this. I need to know what parent participation means. I need a definition, or I need to know what form to fill out. There's something missing. If there's something missing and you can't do it right now, you put it in the revisit bucket. And that means for me, I will put it on my calendar or a reminder app or something, either a week from now to come back to it, or I might put as part of a schedule, I might say, check with Susan about blah, 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 blah. So I'm not going to deal with it right now. I'm going to come back to it and I'm going to decide when to come back to it, but I'm not dealing with it right now. So I revisit it. So you put it aside. Just put it in your reminder app or on a to-do list on your calendar 2 weeks from now or whenever it is you want to revisit it. The third bucket is to release. Sometimes we have things that are so undefined that we can't do them, and we just don't have the information that we need. And sometimes it's something that's not really necessary, that we don't really have to do. And sometimes it's something that's not really your responsibility. So if you're one of those people that you like to jump in and you want to help and you want to be helpful, but you find that you're carrying a whole bunch of extra work, you have to release the stuff that's not yours. So the third bucket is release. It's not mine. It's not defined enough. It's not necessary. It doesn't need to be done right now. Release can be permanent. You can just, I'm not doing that. I don't have to worry about that anymore. Or it could be temporary. You might decide it's September, I'm going to release that for now. We don't have time to do that new structure, but you know what? Maybe we'll come back to it in February when it's a little bit slower. So that's a little bit of a revisit, but it's way down the road. So release is an important one that we don't do enough. Sometimes you'll find things that you don't really have to do. So I have to be purposeful with my time, just like we all do. And there are some things that I would kind of like to do, but I know I just don't have the time. And I know that adding it on would just be too much for me. So I say no to things and I release it and let it go. If it's something that isn't my responsibility and it's supposed to be on somebody else, maybe that person isn't doing the best of job with it. So I might feel that pressure to do it myself because then it would get done right. Don't do that. Let that person do it. Help them if you want to, but don't take that on. It's not yours to carry. So practice that, practice releasing. When you schedule, revisit, and release, and you make that part of your practice, that's part of the sustaining work that I talked about, because it helps you to get open loops out of your head and it helps you to maintain your energy. So that's part of that sustaining. So you get in this practice where you're not dealing with everything all the time at the same urgency. You're sorting things into buckets and then handling them as they need to be handled. So this week, instead of asking, how do I get everything done? My challenge to you is, what is making everything feel urgent in the first place? Because guess what? You can't get everything done. You can't. So you need to think, what's causing the urgency, and focus on that instead. Name your open loops and use your 3 buckets to sort. Get rid of some of this stuff. Move some of it to a better time. That is how you get into the respond and the sustain instead of the reacting to the chronic urgency. In the next episode, we're going to talk about why clarity reduces burnout. So I've talked about clarity a few times in these last 2 episodes and about how unclear things cause invisible work and open loops and all of that. I want to talk more about how clarity is actually helpful. So we've talked about unclear. I want to talk about clarity, and we'll talk about some ways that you can get clarity, whether you're a teacher or kind of give clarity if you're a leader. So we're going to really focus on that in the next episode. So until next time, notice what matters, name what's getting in the way, and remember to reduce the noise and protect the work that matters.